It's Dax!
Boogie woogie oogie my dudes. It's time, yo. I gotta make a video on Dax. I have been aware of Dax since maybe 2017, 2018. He really got everywhere having to do with that Tory Lanez beef. It's interesting that Tory Lanez has been a conduit for YouTube rap in a way between Dax and 6 Seconds. It's just interesting. Some rappers are bottom tier, midstream, like Tory Lanez. Like Tory Lanez can still go #1. Tory Lanez is obviously from Canada, which is why Dax is relevant to Tory Lanez. Dax kind of hopped on that whole Tory Lanez diss track ride. Like Tory Lanez was like, I could out rap anybody, bro. I could out rap Kendrick. And it's like, Tory Lanez. Dax isn't lining up to try to out rap Kendrick Lamar. He's lining up to try to out rap Tory Lanez, you feel me? Tory Lanez came out of that exchange looking like the alpha, pretty undoubtedly. That wasn't even necessarily the first time that I heard about Dax. Also heard about Dax pretty heavily as far as his friction between Screw and Crypt and like Dwayne TV. No Life Shaq. I don't want to throw Shaq in there if he's not involved, but Dax has had a lot of friction with a lot of the core YouTube rap audience, you know? And it's interesting that like via KSI or Screw or whoever it is, I've never really found myself gravitated towards Dax's content. And after hearing what Screw and Crypt and everybody has had to say about him and kind of said their piece about him, you see people like Screw and Crypt kind of turning back on their word as well and like kind of co-signing Dax. Now it seems like they're like look, we made up, but like I'm still not happy about this dude is the vibe that I get. It doesn't seem like that's gonna hold back Dax's growth anymore. I find myself siding with Screw, especially the rest of the scene way more than Dax, you know what I mean? Dax kind of came into that whole exchange seeming like the a-hole and came out of it looking like the a-hole. So I would definitely say that Dax came out of that exchange pretty badly scathed as far as YouTube perception is concerned, right? And Dax is a YouTube rapper, right? Like he relies on the freestyles, and you see people like Young M.A doing freestyles, you see independent like Lil Yachty doing freestyles, you see people do freestyles, maintain relevancy, right? That's just a strategy. Dax has relied on that so heavily while not having any songs that I feel like really blew up because people rocked with the song. It was always because of like a messaging or the video or something else having to do with it. So my initial thoughts of Dax from everything that I had initially encountered from him prior, he seems to utilize a lot of filler. If you're gonna be all about bars like everybody in Dax's fan core says he is, I feel like he can't rely on as much filler as he does. Writing is just down to, I'm gonna reference this thing. That thing that he's referencing doesn't really have power behind it. He could put thought behind it, and there's thought in trying to connect things, obviously, but I just think it's on the lazier end of writing. I'm not feeling anything about his writing. I am not learning anything about him other than the fact that he knows that those things exist. You know, he's not like utilizing references in a way that makes me feel like he's watched the whole show and like knows the emotion behind characters or anything. He's just kind of referencing people, you know? And he also relies on some corny tendencies, whether it be visual or audio corny tendencies, in my opinion. He relies on a lot of the same flows, and he kind of recycles some content. Those are my initial thoughts of Dax, my initial shortcomings maybe in my head of Dax. He doesn't seem like he's an incapable rapper, but it seems like a lot of his issues come down to being infantile writing. Like he's just clearly very new to writing. He's been a janitor, he tells you about it all the time, and he relies on a lot of the same content matter. So a lot of the shortcomings for me for Dax come from a writing perspective. He is clearly talented on some levels. All that aside, took all that, tried to put it aside as well to listen to It's Different Now. It's technically his first 7-track, right? It is an old project for Dax, but he did on All Night Long, I just gotta say it, he called that in 2020 people were gonna be talking about him, and it's true. People are. He did it in 2 years. I gotta say as well that Dax has the best mix and master from a YouTube rapper I've heard so far. I haven't gone through everybody's back catalog, and a lot of, like, obviously I think 6 Seconds has really good mixing. As far as like not being involved in Cypher Gang, because Cypher Gang I think shares a lot of the same mix engineer, Dax kind of is maybe parallel with Crypt as far as mixing and engineering is concerned. But yeah, to go track for track here, I think All Night Long runs okay, but it's a little typical of a Dax track. It's like a baseline level Dax track to me. It seems to be going all night long as well. I wish it was shorter. This is going to be a theme on every song that I talk about, but Dax does not understand a runtime seemingly at all. Move on to the next track, No Cappin'. I think it transitions well from All Night Long. It ultimately just runs really uninteresting to me. I just can't take Dax super seriously about his content matter when the Tory Lanez incident is what I'm remembering from him now. Like, the return to a project from 2018, Dax knowing what's happened to him, it seems like his bars are just kind of like aging like milk. And also, I just need to say it too, they were back-to-back Janitor bars in 2 songs. He had it on All Night Long and he had it on No Cap. And Cracking on My Own, I think has a cool melody, and I don't mind the performance, but it's just long for what it is. He will just leave some filler bars for you to just bask in, you know? Like, it is just, he is giving you like the Fiji bar. Like, why am I sitting there with all that dead space thinking about that Fiji bar? Like, no reason at all. It's one of the better songs on the record, but I come out of the experience feeling full rather than wanting more. As far as Why Is You Leaving, I just think this is the definition of a mid-typical production, mid-content matter, and like a mid-performance. It is just like, it is a mid-song. Nothing stands out to me, it's just there. It is so stereotypical to me, and he doesn't do anything different to me and has already been done over this type of beat about 1 trillion times. Move on to No Respect featuring Futuristic. Also just way too long, basic beat and mentality, and it's just nothing super new. It's not bad, it's just mid. And it's not bad content matter, but it's just handed to me very stereotypically. Typical bars, be it like hated now it's happy, belated, basic now I'm rapping on stages. Like, are you kidding me? Both are so terrible. It's just there's so many bars on this. It's so clear that Dax hasn't been writing for a very long time, you know, and I'm glad he's able to see such success with what he's putting together. It seems like as far as his actual music that aren't his freestyle, he can't really put together something yet. Also, just like the raped it bar, took the game now, I raped it bar, I just gotta say, it's bad. Like, coming from a victim, I just gotta say, like, that made me dislike the song a lot more than I had initially disliked it. The song where he's asking for respect, I feel like he did a lot to not earn it. It just needs to be said, especially for how lazily he laid that raped bar out there. Like, I'm not against the subject matter. Obviously, my most popular song is my own personal count of my victim assault, but just so lazily strung there, and it just comes off insensitive. It's just like, why? He has an interesting flow and vibe, but it's just like the production, it's not terrible, but it's just basic. And it's just, Futuristic is a very capable feature artist, but he just doesn't stand out to me really either here. And it confuses me how that bar went over all the heads that worked in this song, even in 2018. So move on to Gotta Get It featuring OT Genesis. This is a cool feature from a YouTube artist. I love OT Genesis. I think OT Genesis is really dope. I don't like listen to his music all the time, but I think he's a really dope dude. That's a legit feature. It, like, Futuristic makes sense as a YouTube rapper. OT Genesis in 2018 as Dax, I think that's tight, you know. As far as the song itself though, I just think Dax's flow is very basic. It seems like he was trying to chameleon onto OT Genesis's chill, but it just did not work. And then Dax just kind of inevitably then comes off like he's trying light years harder than OT Genesis is trying at all. And I feel like I prefer OT Genesis way more than what Dax does. So for him to be trying so hard and then me to prefer just OT Genesis, just smooth on that, like not really trying, it says something. The hook is okay, but I just think it's very okay for a song with OT Genesis, you know? Like, OT Genesis aside, it's just okay. And like OT Genesis meanwhile just kind of comes in, doesn't really try at all, and like murders it in comparison. As far as Did It First, I think it's kind of alright. It's just another mid Dax track to me with the like slightly more production. There's nothing really new or particularly interesting to see here aside from like mildly outlandish claims from a young Dax. That's just rap these days too, you know, like obviously he's not going to back up everything that he says on a record, and now that's made very clear about a lot of what he's said based on real life encounters. But that's just rap these days, you know, and like without backing it up too direct, the way that mainstream artists have, I feel like it's disingenuous for Dax to say that he like birthed the rap game, like shit like that, you know. As far as the project as a whole, I just think this is a ultimately haphazardly put together collection of songs that comes off incredibly safe and tells me nothing about Dax and who he is as a human. There's clear writing shortcomings and the production is incredibly basic and inventive. While being old music, Dax's music doesn't seem to be aging well. It's aging like milk, like I said earlier. It's been sitting in a room for a couple days and now that shit's bad. I have been having very little to return to aside from like in the moment enjoy, like it being new to me, I'll return to it, but am I gonna return to this in a week? No, just straight up. I find he's especially held back from the run times and the similarities to the tracks and what is an otherwise small track list. You have 7 songs, it should all try to be a little different, you know. It seems like he tried to make the same kind of song 7 different ways. Dax clearly understands what sounds popular, but he struggles to find a lane outside of the shadows of his predecessors. I would give, was it even called? I'd give It's Different Now a 3 out of 10. But that's 2018 Dax, you feel me? I was going into 2020 Dax feeling, I've listened to a lot of Dax's freestyles. I think his recent freestyles have actually been really, really good. And like in 2020 even, I think he's practiced freestyles, quote unquote. Like they're obviously not freestyles, but I was going into, point being, I'll say it for you, pretty open-minded, you know? I wasn't expecting him to move the earth with this record. I was just kind of expecting like a solid little piece of work. You know, I didn't like It's Different Now. He had 2 years to change it up. Does he do more to get a sound? Sorta. Does he do more to prove people wrong? No. I'm just gonna go track for track. I Can't Breathe is just a repetitive beat. It's just not good production. I wish he had the energy that he had on the back half of the record where he was singing like the entire time, but I just do not love the way that he rapped it on the front half. I love the space singing with the same lyrics, but that hook doesn't carry unless he sings it like at all. And it's well layered and the mix is pretty good. Again, it's just like, again, he has some of the better mixing on the platform, hands down. Again, the singing did it for me, but when I'm returning to the track to listen to it a second time, it's just making me wish that that was the whole song. Like why do I have to hear you slowly get there? I know it's an intro. You're only giving me 7 tracks, you know, and I'm not gonna shuffle an intro. I feel like his writing improved a little bit and he sounds more comfortable, but again, ultimately it's like it is still a little infantile as far as writing is concerned. Like he's still very new at writing, and no disrespect, it's just at the same time I don't have to give you a good score. You know, I just think he's new and newer than being given credit. You know, like he could be on a fast road to success. Because he's on a fast road to success, I feel like his writing isn't developing over time like it could have if he didn't just gain success as quickly as he did. To move on to Thought Those Were My Last Words, this is probably my favorite Dax song. My only complaint would be enunciation, especially for a song with that moral content matter. Like the fact that you're saying these are your last words and I can't understand everything that you're saying is just, I think, again, ironic. Maybe a runtime, like I would cut it at maybe like 2 minutes if you asked me, but it's a pretty interesting structure. I think the production and the energy is pretty good and the hook is really elite. This is, again, I think this is my favorite Dax song. To move on to I Need a Break, it's an interesting performance. I don't think it does anything for me though that the song prior didn't already do for me. Again, it's a good performance, but it's just a little typical and it's just forgettable production. And it's just too long for what it is. Can this get on playlist? Sure, but do I like it? No. For Dear God, I physically cringed at a few of those ad-libs. I'm not gonna lie. I was like at work, I was like listening to this with my headphones, and I was like, sometimes. It's an interesting visual. I saw the music video, but I just think the song is incredibly surface level to me, and it runs like every other kind of song that has been bled dry of its essence over the years on YouTube, especially of this content matter. Being a spiritual but not incredibly religious person, this doesn't really do it for me. You know, it just seems, again, very surface level response, I guess, to religion. It's just like to hear his thoughts on it seem very undereducated, I guess. Not in that he has bad takes, but in that he's not really going in depth with why he thinks that or why he might think that, you know? Like, I'm not really learning about Dax, I'm just hearing some references. I also just gotta say as well that it's only 7 tracks, you know? So just at this point, this is already dragging to me due to the run times. I just think I'm 4 tracks deep and I'm already like, how am I still gonna listen to this? I'm thinking about clicking off because of how long those tracks were. And I just think that's what you got to avoid if you're an artist. Book of Revelations, the next track, is incredibly basic production and deserves about the same amount of criticism as I gave Dear God, because again, I feel like that's exactly what's holding me back from liking the song again, is that it's just surface level content. What is he saying differently from everybody else? I can't really tell you. As far as Love Hurts, this barges the fuck in the track list and I loved it, right? Like, I love how this just whips in the track list. Incredibly interesting production. While it can run corny, I don't find it holding back from my enjoyment of the song as a whole. I don't love the rise in energy. I feel like that's a little bit out of place, but I'll give it the credit that it does make me pay attention also to what is being said, and I think that does something for an active listener, but I wish he did something else to do that. I just don't like that creative choice. It's just a long run time again, and in this instance it doesn't hold me back from enjoying the song as a whole as it did for those other tracks. Love Hurts is one of the better songs on this track list. It's just I didn't love some creative choices. For My Heart Hurts, it's just a melody I've heard before from Dax, and it doesn't do anything different than My Last Words or I Need a break to me. I just think that singing delivery can work maybe 2 times on an EP or an album at this size, and I think the size of the track list, it just gets redundant. You know, when you're giving me 7 tracks and 3 of them sound the same, it's like, why'd you only give me 7? I'm only hearing from him every 2 years as far as a track listing this size, you know? And so I like, there's high expectations when you make people wait. And to end it on that, I just feel like is a little haphazard in a way. It's just like, it's like a weird way to end it on the same note as I've already heard a bunch of times. As a whole, I feel like the 7 tracks just drag at the length that they're at, especially when not directly relating to the content matter that Dax is saying. Dax relies on recycling deliveries and occasionally even flows, and I feel like on works that's so small, I need to hear a wider variety of content. The production runs very typical and occasionally poor, but I don't find it just being Dax that's holding me back from coming out of the song disinterested. I think it's the production as well. I would give I'll Say It For You maybe like a light to decent 4 out of 10. It's just, it's like a little bit better than It's Different Now, but both projects are just subpar to me. I feel like this is a very new writer. This is a very adolescent music creator, and that's not bad. Everybody grows over time. These projects aren't very interesting to me. It's nothing I'm gonna return to. Now, to move on to something that he's been doing recently is he's been doing a lot of those freestyles. It seems like a lot of his following has come from freestyles, and he's very good at corralling a fan base. I gotta give him the business credit. He definitely has the business figured out. But if you ask me, even on the freestyles, he just still has a lot of filler, and sometimes he'll just like lay entire stanzas that are just not good, you know, just straight up, and it just overall comes up very safe with an edgy coat of paint on top of it. I feel like his performance and his delivery just seems to stay at like a constant level of grit, but his performance does a lot to make me pay attention. I think that sometimes can be to his detriment because he's doing so much to make me pay attention to what he's saying. Sometimes what he's saying doesn't meet the expectation of his performance level. It just feels like not very seasoned writing. And I think some of his better lyrics are strayed over the parts of the beat that don't even accent them. It seems like some of Dax's better bars aren't correctly placed. I find Dax gets more obscure with his delivery. Like, be at the end of the beatbox freestyle, I find myself actually liking that delivery enough and its uniqueness to excuse some lyrical limits. Honestly, the majority of the Whoopty freestyle I really enjoyed. I feel like excluding the Will Smith bar stanza, the majority of that freestyle, he sounds comfortable. I mean, maybe it's like 15 seconds long, but you carried everything else prior pretty easily, and that's great production, you know, and it proves how Dax can sound good over great production. But that's great production, you know, and I don't think Dax puts together great production unless he strips it from mainstream people. And again, I feel like he accents his lyrics so much that it almost puts in this anticipation on what he's saying that it doesn't quite hit, at least yet, with how his writing is concerned. To break down like I do with everybody, the who are you, why are you, and why now, as far as if Dax answers who are you, I don't think that he does yet. I find myself being lost with knowing who Dax really is. Someone with like a quote-unquote lyrical like following and like a fan base who follows him for the lyrical content, I find a majority of his bars and lyrics don't have, for me, again, without directly relating to them, it doesn't even really tell me about how he thinks or who he really is whatsoever. I think his production as far as visuals concerned are great, but I think you could see why that would succeed on YouTube, and I think he's unique in that respect while remaining realistic, independent standard. Like, he's showing that anybody could do it. Without a real differentiation in content matter or sounds, I find myself doing nothing but sitting back and kind of absorbing what he's saying, not really listening or vibing. It's just a majority of what is absorbing in my brain that I'm like forced to pay attention to in a way from his delivery. It's just kind of mid. It doesn't really tell me about him. It's not really referencing stuff that performance doesn't make me feel any type of way. It's just there. As far as the why are you, I just think that's another category where Dax kind of lacks, if you ask me. No, I know it rhymed. I'm so sorry. I don't want it to sound mean. Dax kind of lacks there. As far as him telling me about himself, other than maybe his religious tidings, I just think that his constant delivery and performance-based lines maybe force some of his content to get a little lost in the sauce, and it comes off very stiff and uncomfortable for someone who is at his level now. It seems like he's grown so quickly, but his music hasn't grown with him. As far as why now, I think Dax makes clean, good mixed music. It's very easy to see why he would be making waves because his pack is very clean and safe, in my opinion, at times. His content doesn't always do very much to counteract that aesthetic, and it makes me feel like I need more to feel how he feels. He's doing a lot of telling and not a lot of showing. To break down, again, the boxes that I'd want checked as someone for why now if they deserve it, does Dax have the audience pull? Absolutely. He's very good at corralling an audience, and he is corralling that audience to do what he needs them to do. As far as a writing ability, I don't think Dax checks that box, straight up. I don't think Dax has the writing ability of a mainstream artist if when he gets to that level to stay there. I think he can stumble upon it, but I don't know if when he stumbles upon it, he'll be able to maintain it. It takes a lot of time as an artist to corral something that you stumble upon. So the hope is that you stumble upon it in isolation, grow it. Dax just doesn't have the writing. It's very basic is what it comes down to, and I think that will force people to get sick of what he's putting together, you know, and then I think that's what people can't get sick of what you're slapping together, you know. That's how you stay there. You gotta make something interesting, or if you can't, you gotta branch out and do something else. As far as the passion and the hunger, Dax seems to be willing to drop a freestyle and kill a freestyle in some respects anytime, any day of the week. Can he put together a song that will be playlisted and passed around? Still remains to be seen. So does he have the passion and the hunger? Sure, but does he have maybe the uniqueness to the culture and the game? I don't think so, because he hasn't done anything to define his own sound really without having to do it over other mainstream production. And when he does it on these records, it's just very few and far between, and he doesn't capitalize on moments that work. He just falls back on safety. As far as a production, music, and a mix, I think Dax, again, very closely checks this box, but the production is just not it for me. The music and the mix is there for the most part. I think when he puts together a sound, at worst it just really overstays a welcome. When he has the performance level, it's good. The mix is good, the production works sometimes, but again, it's just few and far between on small track lists. As far as memorability, I think Dax isn't particularly memorable. He does a lot to aesthetically be memorable. I feel like a lot of his content matter, I find myself having to return to remember what he even said. None of his bars really stick with me. Nothing he's saying seems to really be shaking the level in the way that he seems to be saying he is. As far as a personality, Dax doesn't seem like a terrible person. Seeing how that whole YouTube kind of beef played out, it made me double think how Dax is as a businessman. So as far as personality is concerned, I can't speak on someone I don't know. It seems like Dax has done a lot to try to correct his wrongs in those respects, but it seems like it took a whole lot for him to admit that he should have corrected his wrongs on. I wish maybe he treated that situation better than he did, but I guess I'll check the box of personality because it doesn't seem like he's speaking anything bad into the discussion. It just seems like he's not adding much to it. He's just kind of noise right now. I don't think he's a very clear voice. As far as the marketability, I think Dax is incredibly marketable, and I think he does a lot for his marketability. That's probably the biggest box to check as far as becoming mainstream. You know, like it's so much about selling the product, not so much about the product itself. But when the product gets in front of a whole lot of people, how they think about it does matter, you know? So will Dax be mainstream? I think he's on the fast track to do so. Is he prepared for it? Maybe. I think there's a benefit sometimes to shorter and stunted growth because you can develop who you are in private and not in public. I think most mainstream rappers, and praised rappers at that, are typically shut-ins and don't release an overload of content. And Dax dumped a ton of content to get where he is now, and it's respectable, but it just doesn't do much for me, or at least not particularly. And that does a lot to worry me about his ability to stay there once he gets there. Like, he hits every category that you'd want him to hit. I feel like he relies heavy on a mix, and he does bare minimum at some times to differentiate himself as far as it comes to style and performance, which I find myself resonating with most mainstream artists when they do that, and I think most people do as well. I prefer when Dax switches it up and changes his style on a record, but I wish he just maintained one style per record and like really developed one style at a time rather than trying to be like, yeah, I'm a Swiss Army knife of rappers, you know? Like, I get it, but like, you don't seem to be particularly great at any of those things. You seem to be okay at all of those things. Again, Dax is on the fast route to success, but I have major doubts that he'll be able to maintain the success into himself, the human, or into himself, the artist, and see the success that he does for a long period of time. I think maybe he might be someone who gets to that stage and fizzles out, but I'm very willing and ready for him to prove me wrong.